Hello, dear viewers. Namaskar. Welcome to Moksha Media. You are with Moksha Hiremat. Most of you know the 12th century incident in which Sharana Chalavali, that is movement, played a dominant role in the history of Karnataka's socio-political, religious, economical and cultural fields. It is an unforgettable moment in the history of any country. Of course, the movement was led by the political leader Basavanna and the spiritual leader Allama Prabhu. They gave a shape to the Sharana movement which took place in the 12th century AD of Karnataka. Of course, the provinces now we have in Karnataka are different from the provinces which were in the 12th century. Almost all places up to Afghanistan, that is Uttarapateshwara and Dakshinapateshwara, provinces or regions that belong to Karnataka. Especially southern India was under the control of Karnataka kings. So in such a time, the Sharana movement took place. Sharanas were devotees of Shiva. They revolted against social inequality and fight for the freedom of their profession and humanity. They stood for equality, fraternity and liberty in the modern sense. Of course, it was a different type of movement in the history of India or in any other countries for that matter. So many common people were participated in the movement demanding justice and social equal opportunities for the people who were professionals. The persons participated in the movement were skilled, semi-skilled and labor-oriented persons which had who had their own dignity, that is the professional dignity. Of course, that Basavanna, a political leader in the kingdom of Bijjala, who was a Samanta Raja of Kalyana Chalukyas. Basavanna emerged as a political leader under Bijjala, and Bijjala used him as a tool in order to capture the power and in order to enthrone Kalyana Chalukya king, that is Emperor Tailapa. Of course, he captured Kalyana and became a king. So, until that time, Bijjala, a Jaina, aspiring for power, property and rule, used Basavanna and Sharanas for his own selfishness. After enthroning Tailapa king, he turned his swords towards Sharanas, that is the devotees of Shiva. Devotees of Shiva were committed to their goals They were committed to their understanding. They were committed to social justice and liberty and fraternity. Even though they were not, even though they did not know the letters, they composed vachanas in their own ways. Those composed vachanas were read in Anubhava Mantapa, where they are written on palm leaves and edited and deposited in palm leaves library. So that was the method. So in such a way, vachanas were composed, and in such a way, the persons who didn't know the letters became the literates and educated in the real sense. They might not be known letters, but they were educated in the real sense when we compared nowadays letter known animals produced by these educational institutions. Of course, such institutions are innumerable in the states, in Indian states. They are producing these animal-like persons in a large way. They use the word educated, but in the real sense, in the strict sense, they were not educated. They simply knew the letters. But the situation at that time was completely different. So the Sharanathas did not know the letters, but they were educated in the real sense, because they were nurtured in such a cultural and in such a lifestyle manners. Even though they did not know the letters, they knew how to behave, how to react, how to say, what to fight against, what to do, what were the aims of life, etc., etc. Those Sharanathas were not be compared to the present day persons who become Sharanathas in the name of this Sharana or that Sharana. Those Sharanathas were not hypocrites. They did what they said what they did. That was the speciality of them. So many common people participated in Vachana Chalavali, that is Sharana Chalavali, and tried their best to bring the social justice for the people who were oppressed, suppressed, and deprived of their opportunities. They were not against the persons, but they were against the social system. They were for the social justice, but not for social injustice. And in such a way, the Sharana movement went on and on under the political leadership of BogaNNa and the spiritual leadership of Allama Prabhu. It is well known to everyone. So now we have vachanas which reveal the content of that Sharana movement and Vachana movement. Vachanas were used to express their feelings, thoughts and emotions spontaneously and sometimes systematically. But anyhow, they contributed a lot to language and literature of Kannada and culture of Kannada. And here I would like to tell you something about a Vachanakara who committed to Sharana Chalavali, who participated in Sharana Chalavali. He was Prasaadi BogaNNa. Prasaadi BogaNNa was born and bred in the 12th century in about 1160 AD. We don't have much of information regarding Prasaadi BogaNNa, but his 103 vachanas, 103 vachanas are found. His signature was Channabasavana Priya BogaNNa Mallikarjuna Linga. Under this signature, he composed vachanas. So, even though he composed his vachanas in his own way, but they touched the heart and minds of the people who go through them. And Prasaadi BogaNNa attained the Prasaadi Sthala. That's why he is called as Prasaadi BogaNNa. Prasaadi Sthala is one of the 6 sthalas, is one of the Shatasthalas in Veerashaivism. And of course, Prasada is a concept which should not be wasted. To the extent we are in need of it, should be used, and remaining should not be wasted. Not only that, and the person should work, he should earn his bread, and the left out bread, he should earn his bread, and he should share it with the others, Shiva devotees, every day. After offering food to Shiva devotees, he had to take his food. That was the tradition of Prasaadi BogaNNa. Of course, Prasaadi BogaNNa did it every day without laziness. And that Prasaadi BogaNNa, while earning his own bread, felt something, thought something, and whatever he thought and felt was composed into vachanas. Those vachanas are before us now. So anyhow, I would like to quote 2 or 3 of his vachanas, which you know them, definitely you will understand them properly. These vachanas need not know any introduction, need not know any clarification, because vachanas are such simple, even a layman can understand them by going through those vachanas. That is the speciality of vachanas in Kannada literature and culture. Even today, some people try to write vachanas in their own way. They follow the vachanas of the 12th century, modifying here and there, and express their thoughts and emotions in a simplistic and dignified way. By that, they try their best to awaken the people. And that is what Prasaadi BogaNNa did in his life. Here, I would like to quote his vachanas. If I want to see the truth through philosophy, if I want to see the truth through philosophy, it is like mirror in the hands of a monkey. It is like a mirror in the hands of a monkey, shows nothing but what I do and no other quality. If I want to call you in the hills and caves, it is just a call. As much truth as I have, as much faith as I have, Channabasavana Priya Boga Mallikarjuna is that much. So, he compared the truth to philosophy, and it compared it to a mirror. If you look at the mirror, automatically it reflects your image, and that image is like a monkey's image. That mirror reflects what we do, how we do. That monkey can do it. So, in that way, the truth is there in the hands of the monkeys. but it doesn't show anything. It doesn't show any quality. Anyone call it in the hills, anyone call it in the caves. Then it just becomes a call, but not a real voice of a devotee. It just became a call, but not a truth. So, the faith is important. One should have the faith, and that faith shows the truth, the real truth in the strict sense. So, Channa Basavarna Priya Boga Mallikarjuna is that much. So, one should keep faith on Channa Basavarna Priya Boga Mallikarjuna, that is a God, an incarnation of Shiva, etc., etc. So anyhow, the vachana is simple. Then another vachana. Devotion is root, detachment is a tree, knowledge is fruit. Devotion is root, detachment is a tree, knowledge is fruit. When the fruit is ripe, it is knowledge limited. When the fruit is ripe, it is knowledge limited. When it leaves the stalk, it is knowledge unlimited. When it is tasted, it is knowledge internalized. When it is tasted, it is knowledge internalized. When the pleasure becomes itself, it is knowledge divine. When the divine light is not abated, it is knowledge complete. As Channa Basavarna Priya, Boga Mallikarjuna is measureless. You cannot say it is the body of the thing. So here he uses the knowledge, fruit, limited and unlimited, and the taste which is internalized, and which it becomes knowledge, which it becomes in the end a divine knowledge. That divine knowledge is important. So that divine knowledge is measureless. And that divine knowledge can be gained by concentrating on Channa Basavarna Priya Boga Mallikarjuna, because he is measureless. So, you do not say that is the body of the thing, like that he expresses his thoughts regarding the knowledge. And another vachana, it may be a ball of metal, but can it pierce before it becomes a sword? It may be a ball of metal, but can it pierce before it becomes a sword? It may be a flowering plant, but where is its fragrance before it flowers? That is the explanation of duality and non-duality in the Channa Basavarna Priya Boga Mallikarjuna. In this vachana, Prasaadi BogaNNa tells us the difference between duality and non-duality. These are the philosophical concepts which are very popular in Karnataka even today. Because there are communities which follow duality, and there are also communities which follow non-duality. That is Drishya and Adrishya, Jiva and Prana, and of course touching the feet of Shiva and becoming Shiva oneself. So like this, these things are there in the society. In one way or another way, they take a man towards divinity. They make a man a real man in the strict sense. So, he gives the example of a sword. So, sword becoming a sword, shaping a sword, it is a metal ball. If it is simply a metal ball, it cannot pierce the bodies. It cannot pierce the things. But when it is shaped as a sword, then only it pierces the bodies, then only it goes through things. Then only it cuts the things as it likes. So, like that, the flowering plant, there is a plant. Flowers are there in the plant. But when the plant is flowered, then only we can see then only we can smell the fragrance of those flowers. But here the question, is fragrance not there before flowering the plant? Yes, that fragrance is there, but it is not smelled at that time. When the plant is flowered, then only the fragrance of the flower can be smelled. Then only the fragrance of the flower can be felt and smelt. So, that the fragrance is hidden in the plant itself, before or after, but it takes its own time to be bloomed, to be spread, and etc. So, like that, we can see the difference between duality and non-duality. And we can see that in Channabasavana Priya, BogaNNa, that is, the Vachana ends with this signature. It is common in Vachanas. Each of the Vachanas ends in a signature of a particular favorite god or a person or something else. Generally, it is name of his favorite god. It may be Sthavara or Jangama. Most of the signatures represent the Sthavara Linga. Basavanna's Kudala Sangamadeva, Allama Prabhu's Guheshwara, Akka Mahadevi's Channamallikarjuna, Jedara Dasimaya's Vachanas, we can see the end of the Vachanas, which ends representing Sthavara Lingas. Of course, you cannot differentiate Sthavara Linga and Jangama Linga. That is, it is very difficult to differentiate between Sthavara and moving Linga. Of course, one is not without the other. Sthavara becomes moving one and moving one becomes a Sthavara. And of course, Jangama represents moving things. Sthavara represents the static things. Static forces produces movement when the time comes, and Sthavara becomes a Jangama, Jangama becomes a Sthavara. That is the style of the life. That is the way of the life. That is the formula the nature gives us to us. We have to understand it properly. Of course, Kayaka and Kailasa must be there. One should make a Kayaka and then he has to try to attain Kailasa. Kailasa and Kayaka are not different. One who does Kayaka would go to Kailasa. One who is in Kailasa also does Kayaka. That is, Kayaka and Kailasa are the steps in the life of a man. Without Kayaka, you cannot attain Kailasa. Without Kailasa, you cannot do a Kayaka. So, if you want to differentiate Kayaka and Kailasa in other ways, it spoils the concept of Sharanas. So, here the same thing can be said of ಚನ್ನ ಮಲ್ಲಿಕಾರ್ಜುನ ಪ್ರಿಯ ಬೋಗಣ್ಣ ಮಲ್ಲಿಕಾರ್ಜುನ. So, is a signature Channa Basavanna Priya. Of course, Channa Basavanna was a Vachanakara. He was a philosopher. He guided Basavanna. He advised Basavanna in so many cases. And that Channa Basavanna introduced Basavanna to Veerashaivism, to the path of Shaivism, to the path of Guru, Linga and Jangama. And of course, here Prasaadi BogaNNa also accepted that Channa Basavanna as his signature, and he used that signature in his vachanas. Of course, ultimately the Channa Basavanna Priya Mallikarjuna becomes an incarnation of Shiva, that is God, Shiva God, that is Mallikarjuna. Of course, ultimately it becomes a Stavara Linga. Ultimately it becomes a static linga which gives way to moving linga, which gives way to Jangama. That means Charachara. That means moving. That means in a movement. That is what we have to see in the vachanas of Prasaadi BogaNNa. Of course, I hope you have caught the point I revealed to you. Subscribe and share. See you in the next episode. Thank you. Namaskar.